wrong. No, never. Well, I'll apologize if I need to, but for something like this, absolutely not. I stand by my comments.
And with that, John Kelly has lost the benefit of the doubt. You could doubt that he was lying about Congresswoman Frederica Wilson when he told a story about her 2 weeks ago in the White House press briefing room that was completely untrue from start to finish. You could have allowed the possibility that it was just a mistake and not a lie. That's what his defenders did. His defenders did not claim that he was telling the truth, just that he made a mistake, an honest mistake. John Kelly's defenders believed that he is an honorable man, largely because he used to be a general and because he publicly claims to be an honorable man.
You know, when I was a kid growing up, a lot of things were sacred in our country. Women were sacred, looked upon with great honor.
So there's John Kelly publicly claiming to be one of those noble men from yesteryear who believes that women are sacred and must always be looked upon with great honor, except when he's attacking a woman with lies seconds later, except when he is dehumanizing a woman, refusing to even use her name and calling her repeatedly an empty barrel. Let's watch John Kelly doing that one more time, this time knowing what we discovered the next day. Congresswoman Wilson never claimed to have obtained the funding for that building that cost close to $200 million, not the $20 million that John Kelly thinks it cost. The Congresswoman never asked President Obama anything about that building, never thanked him in her comments, but she did thank Republican Speaker of the House at the time, John Boehner. When you watch John Kelly drag all of those falsehoods into his comments now, including President Obama, try to imagine what's going on in his mind. What's driving that? Why the mention of Obama in this starkly negative story about political grandstanding and not the mention of John Boehner? If you're watching a false memory at work, ask yourself what drove these particular things into his false memory.
And the Congresswoman stood up in the long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there and all of that, and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building. Now, she took care of her constituents because she got the money, and she just called up President Obama, and on that phone call, he gave the money, the $20 million to build a building. And she sat down, and we were stunned that she'd done it. Even for someone that is that empty a barrel, we were stunned.
And we are all stunned at General Kelly. You just saw anger, you just saw intense bitterness, and if it was just a faulty memory back then when he said it, John Kelly has now publicly cemented all of those words, all of those falsehoods into a public lie. Because John Kelly has had 2 weeks to apologize as soon as everything he said was proven untrue the very next day. And he has spent every day since then teaching us a very ugly lesson about what John Kelly does not hold sacred, about what John Kelly does not honor. He does not hold women sacred. John Kelly does not honor women, as he personally proved in his next breath that day, when he attacked a woman, Frederica Wilson, and as he proves every day now by refusing to apologize to her. And you would like to give John Kelly the benefit of the doubt that his dehumanizing of Frederica Wilson and his refusal to apologize for his lies about her have nothing to do with race. You would like to give him that benefit of the doubt. And then, in the same interview this week where he refuses to apologize to the black congresswoman he lied about, he says this about America's war over slavery.
It's inconceivable to me that you would take what we think now and apply it back then. I would tell you that Robert E. Lee was an honorable man. He was a man that gave up his country to fight for his state, which in 150 years ago was more important than country. It was always loyalty to state first back
John Kelly, the amateur historian, is full of poisonous falsehoods about American history that he shares with the most ignorant president in history. John Kelly doesn't want to apply the standards of today to Robert E. Lee. Okay, let's not. How about the standards of Robert E. Lee's sister, who sided with the North in the Civil War and whose son joined the Union Army? How about the standards of Robert E. Lee's nephew, who joined the Union Army? How about the standards of the 40% of Virginia's officers who remained in the service of the Union Army? John Kelly dishonors all of them who got it right, morally right, in order to declare the most murderous traitor in American history to be an honorable man. Robert E. Lee owned slaves, beat slaves, and sold individual members of slave families to different buyers. Robert E. Lee did every vile thing that the worst slave owners did at that time when honorable and decent people knew that it was evil. No one in American history has been more guilty of treason than Robert E. Lee. In an 1865 editorial, the New York Times said he has levied war against the United States more strenuously than any other man in the land, and thereby has been specially guilty of the crime of treason as defined in the Constitution of the United States. And 3 days later, Robert E. Lee was indicted for treason. But generals are especially generous to generals, and General Ulysses S. Grant interceded with President Andrew Johnson to get the treason case against Robert E. Lee dropped. And now retired General John Kelly tries to tell us that Robert E. Lee was an honorable man. Robert E. Lee is responsible for the deaths of more American soldiers than all of the enemies the United States has ever faced in war combined, including Hitler. Robert E. Lee killed more American soldiers than Hitler did. And now both Robert E. Lee and Hitler are champions to the white supremacists and anti-Semites who marched in Charlottesville chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and were declared publicly by John Kelly's boss to include some good people. And so how do you give the benefit of the doubt to a man who grew up in a racist time and place and who never found a public way that we know of to take a stand against the racism of his neighborhood and of his culture, and who now tells us that a racist slave owner who committed treason in order to kill more American soldiers than anyone in history is an honorable man, and he did all that killing to preserve slavery? How do you give the benefit of the doubt to a man who says that we had the Civil War because of a failure to compromise and refuses to explain what his compromise over slavery would have been, and who has been flagrantly demonstrating his own personal failure for 2 full weeks to apologize to a black woman that he has so willfully and deliberately dehumanized and lied about? John Kelly has not said a single word in the last 2 weeks to earn the benefit of that doubt. We might all have to thank John Kelly someday for preventing a madman from starting a nuclear war in the middle of the night, but he deserves nothing but dishonor for his public conduct in the last 2 weeks.